Thanks everybody for joining again. Excited for the team to share some updates, do some demos, just kind of continuing on from last month. I know there's a lot of good stuff to share. And Paul and Nathaniel, just thankful for your guys' really hard work with this platform and just all the questions you get from me and from this community. So really glad we're continuing this. I think it's a great venue. To just keep the momentum going. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to y'all. I'll be monitoring chat.
Start sharing my screen, jumping right into this. All right. All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just what was released over the last week or so. So 237.1, as well as a bunch following that to fix some bugs and added a few minor capabilities. Some of those around retention policies. So we had retention, the ability to do be time series based deletion of conversations and documents for personal, group, and public workspaces for organizations that want to use that to help just manage that. I highly suggest enable conversation archiving for that, so you don't lose any of that information unless organization you've decided you do not want to retain anything. And some organizations have decided to do that. But now we also have the ability to push out policies, so all users or groups or public workspaces leverage the exact same global policy. Now they can individually change it, but it pushes it out, at least that way. We also added private networking support for AZD, which is fantastic. The ability for user agreements for file uploads. So, and I'll showcase what that looks like, and you get to control what that statement is. Maybe you want to just say, hey, make sure there's no PII in here, or you're not uploading this kind of documentation. That can be set for every single time they upload or be good for the day. And every time they agree to it, we've also integrated what's called activity logs. So now we're collecting more information for the admins to understand what's going on, for users to see what's happening, and then that will be traceable. We also added web search. Woo! So web search is back using Azure AI Foundry agents. So you have to configure an agent to do that. And we can hop in. I'll show what that looks like real quick. Conversation deep linking. This is setting up for the future, being able to share conversations, stuff like that. But this is using direct URLs to conversations. So now you can bookmark a conversation and come back to it as well. Now, if you share that link, a user isn't going to be able to just access that. So it doesn't open it up to inadvertent RBAC or security violations. They need to have access and permissions to it still. So right now, only will have access to it. Down the line, we'll have some permissions and stuff around that you'll be able to clearly understand. But for today, it's just setting the groundwork. It's URL-based conversation access. Again, you need to authenticate to get to it. And then plugins and then some bug fixes and stuff like that. Now, some of the things that have come out since then, extending the retention policies for a few other days. We had a logo issue on a bug, some more stuff around retention policy updates, some sidebar conversations were loading kind of weird. We've cleared that up so that everything that loads a lot faster there, which is nice. Some identity for speech, Unicode as well. All right, so here's the demo. We're going to talk about a few things that came out a little bit before that as well around speech. But let's just look at the retention policy stuff. So here's the retention policies. So now you can define these. And then when you push them out, you can push this out. It goes through, and tells you, what all was updated, how many users received it and everything like that. What it looks like from the user's perspective. So now we have this a lot higher quality user profile section as well that's giving the users great information as to what they've been doing, document usage, token, storage, all this kind of stuff. And then we have these retention policies. So what it does, it goes through and updates every user to say use organization defaults. Now they can come in here still right now and change this. And this was due to flexibility. Instead of doing forcing right now, if we have users or organizations that want to force this so they can't change it all, please let us know. I see a question there from Micah. Is the documentation is the stable versus beta? The main branch is always the stable release. If you want the beta version, anything that's coming out, what's there but could be a little flaky is the development branch. So test it out, please. And we have some organizations that use development branch with their development environment, and we get great feedback. And then here's the stuff around speech. So this came out in the last release, but this is in between our, when we had our last Simple Chat community call, and then text to speech. So then you get to control this. Right now, this is really commercial focused. We are looking at how to make this work in the government side, the Azure government deployments. All right.
Your plans to disable file uploads on personal chats.
So that is a good one. We do have a request here. So we'll be adding an optional feature that admins control to disable the ability from uploading the chat at all. So you can turn that on and off. That will be coming. And we'll talk about the roadmap here in a second. All right, so we're just going to hop in the hop over here real quick. With the support now, we have support for reasoning for the models, GPT models. This changes based on which model you have. 5.2 supports different ones. This allows you to control the reasoning level and stuff like that for the models, which does have significant impact with how long it takes to respond, but then also how verbose and thoughtful the response is. It is really nice. We also have streaming. So now you can do, I'm just gonna grab this over here, start a new one. Let's turn off voice. So now you do a streaming response, which means you start getting response back a lot faster than otherwise. Of course, it still has to do a little bit of thought here. There it goes. You can see the streaming coming in. So if it's a long response, you're going to get something a lot faster than waiting for the entire thing to be created. I was going to show something else here. Let's say, hey, can you tell me about who found quantum theory? I'm going to turn this on as well. So when you complete, this can hold up to 90 seconds. And then there's a 4-second delay, so you can cancel it. Maybe you just wanted it to annotate for you instead of sending it all the way along. But if you wait, it'll eventually send it for you. Now you can have streaming plus this, so it'll start streaming in, which is great. And then you're going to see this little icon down here. Oops, I need to share my audio.
Theory didn't have a single founder. It was built by many scientists over a few decades, each adding key ideas and experience.
There you go. So now you can have a conversation with your chat experience. And, I think this is a lot nicer instead of just having a bubble that talks with you. I think it's nice to be able to see what it created so you can read through it and hear it verbally, and it takes you along as it talks back to you. And this is where you can turn this on and off. So if you actually in a conversation too, you can actually kick this off on your own.
Sounds like you're testing something and it's making progress. What?
So that way you don't have to wait for it to just be a conversational thing. You can make any one of these generate the text. Now, this is something we don't have yet, but think about exporting this as a audio file or something like that too. You might have something that creates some kind of content that you then want to use that audio file for a video or something else. Maybe you're doing a podcast. I don't know. And I think those are some good ones here on the latest feature. So we're going to hop over. Anybody have any questions on what we covered right here? Oh, let me do one more here. I'm going to do an upload to chat. Let's do that one. This user agreement. This is where that user agreement that I was talking about earlier, you accept it, and then it starts processing it. And I think that file type that I had, we don't support, so it didn't upload it. But that's the goal, and it works with, you can enable it for personal, group, public, and also the chat. So if you're in a chat conversation and you select the file, it'll also prompt you that you have to accept it before it starts processing it.
Got a question. You mentioned features, possible, not possible on the gov side. I'm I'm going to assume this is specifically related to speech. Is there an appropriate way to determine which features won't be available? Knowledge of Azure Gov Cloud services versus what simple chat needs?
Yeah, the speech is the first time where we really had a disparity between the commercial and gov. And so it's really just the speech right now that isn't supported in gov correctly. We will be looking at rectifying that, see if there's something we can do with gov. Maybe it's just voice to text. Maybe we don't get text to voice back, but we'll be working through that. There are no celebrity voices. It's just the list that we provide here, that the speech, that the service provides. But there's a lot. So, a lot of different voices to choose from. You can
And languages.
And languages, yeah. And you can preview all these. All right, well, looks like I have a little bug there. Or maybe I was just going too fast. All right, we're going to hop over to the release, to the roadmap, because I know this is really important for everybody. So the roadmap, again, we're going to get through this. We're doing pretty good here at 1:15. So the roadmap right now, some of the big things, documentation. This is my main focus right now for a while, is getting the documentation, a lot more documentation, a lot more videos for admins, users, troubleshooting guys, FAQs, developer support. So if you want to code, what's a really great way to go through that. And then Nathaniel's going to show some of this off, but agent templates, remote agents, AI Foundry, multi-GPT endpoints, really cool stuff. ServiceNow integration, that will be coming out. It's already in the development branch that adds those fixes. Some more fixes here around groups, control center, some of these other stuff. I did not show workspace tags. So that is coming. I'm just going to show over real quick, that everybody that was looking at this, here's what groups say. This is like the beginning of it. Ability to manage your tags, add new ones. We'll be integrating both these with the existing document classification tags as well. And then you have these tags and you come in, you select your files. You can do one or more, tag assignment, then come in and select the tags here, assign it. And then once they're assigned, then you start getting this folder, this grid structure here. Now, it's going to be updated. This is still all preliminary stuff. They'll be reduced down here, but you'll have your document classification tags. We'll be adding global tags so admins can include tags that are then used across the platform. Eventually, you can also use those tags for your agents and stuff like that too, to help align things, as well as some other endpoint stuff here to keep, hey, maybe I have a tag that's just for ITAR data, so ITAR or your agent, your action, so you don't mix things up. But this is coming down the pike here, really quick.
Got another question. I see approvals are now in the version that we have.
Yeah.
What are those approvals for? Like, what can you require approvals for uploads maybe?
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good one. So right now, the approval process is right now around Control Center. So as Control Center admins, and it's this different role, it's called Control Center admin, you can assign if you enable that. Now, let me show you that real quick. App settings, you'll see this new Control Center area. And you can add, this Control Center admin. And you can also do a Control Center dashboard reader. So if you give this role out, on the dashboard, those users get to see this. So think about management and leadership and stuff like that. They can come in here and see what's going on from a dashboard perspective, but they don't have access to the activity logs or managements for users, groups, and public workspaces. The approval process right now is built around this workflow. So if I want to come in here and delete all these person's documents, I submit that request. That user will then get an approval notification. I didn't do it for myself, so it doesn't show up. You can see right here, actually, this is an older one. You would come in here and then you can approve it. I can't because I initiated it. So another admin can approve it or the user can approve it. And then it will go through and initiate that. So that does set the groundwork for other approvals. We don't have them for document uploads, but that's something we could, investigate. I think it's a great idea. Go to our GitHub repo and create a new issue here. You don't even have to log in, I don't think. You can create new ones, put it in there. I think that's a great idea. And then we have notifications here. So when you upload documents, these documents now show when they're ready. So you don't have to sit here and watch it. You can go away, come back, then it, you click on it, it takes you over there. So notifications are in here as well for doing a lot of stuff. Retention policy. So when the retention policy runs, if it cleans any of your stuff up, it lets you know that that kind of stuff happened as well. As well as approvals.
Agent templating, one of the features I will be demoing later, will also be using the approvals and notifications systems.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to pop back over to the roadmap. Tabular data, it has not been the best experience, but we are working on this right now. I have it in another branch. It does work significantly better, but we have to work through how to make it like homogeneous between the workspace and the chat experience. And essentially we're going to be treating, it's going to require this enhanced storage. So we won't be chunking tabular data once we move, if you enable it. It's going to then be stored in a storage account and interacted with by an agent using Pandas or Pandas. So then it essentially treats tabular data like a database. So it knows how to interact with it. It works dramatically better. And the goal, most tabular data isn't search. It's not to search in. It can still do the search though with this Pandas. So we just won't be chunking tabular data because it has not provided the best experience for what most people are looking for when it comes to interacting with tabular data. So that's going to be coming along, and that will be an optional edition that requires a storage account, kind of like enhanced citations. Some other things, whole file analysis. So we already have the files, but right now when you ask a question, it searches. We're not doing like a compare document A to B or find out how many times it says the word the in a document. Right now you can't do that because we're doing search-based analysis. We'll be adding in, again, it'll be an agent that can then go in and do this whole document stuff. So we'll be adding that in, exporting conversations, assigning models to whitelist, and this will make a lot more sense when Nathaniel does his demo. But you'll be able to then say, hey, this user can use this model, this user can use that model. Everybody else can use these models. This way it gives you a little bit more control over who can do what with which model. Outbound MCP actions, that will be coming as well. So, but this is going to require these two here, some additional new whitelisting, blacklisting, some governance around the FQDNs for actions in general. So you can add more governance as to what is allowed, where they're allowed to go to for these actions and stuff like that, which needs to be in place before we do MCP because, just the vulnerabilities and, security, I think it's really important there. Shareable conversations, we already talked about that a little bit. Granular permissions for agent creation. This is something we're investigating too. The ability to say, let's turn agents on for users, but then let's, only for these users or only these groups. We've had that kind of request. Exporting, this is, exporting messages. So messages can be exported as a Word file, open up that message into an email. So it'll populate the subject and body based on the message content itself, because maybe you want to write an email. You don't want to then have to copy and paste it. It'll just kick it off. Exporting tables and messages as CSV or Excels. So it'll open up that, download it. Then you can open it up from your browser download folder. And then also exporting audio files. So I kind of talked about earlier. User assigned managed identity for all the services. We already support, system assign, but this gives a little bit more flexibility and control. And then down the line more, but this ability to do these advanced services running external containers. So right now we have the single app, but truly starting to add the ability to create other containers that run offloaded tasks. So things like creating documents in a lot more detail using latex and stuff like that. Creating group chats. We need real-time communication for group chats so you get a good experience. So having that kind of process. Inbound MCP. So then Copilot can interact with all of your simple chat data. That'll be starting off with just personal workspaces. Integrated workspace sync. So right now, getting files that are in a file share into your workspace, group workspace, whatnot, you have to copy and upload them, or the organization has to create their own Python connection and stuff like that that's doing it. We'll be looking at having an external container they can run. And then imagine in your workspace, you'll see a sink. You can go in, you know, it can use your identity, or you can provide the credentials, whatever it is, to sync with a file share or do a website scrape or something like that. And then that will be available as an object then in your workspace.
We have another question, since that sounds like a good stopping point for you. I see also under user management, you can disallow file uploads, which works to keep file uploads from happening in personal chats. It gives a not pretty error when you try. However, it does seem to work. Am I using the feature right, or did it have another goal?
That is the goal. The fact that it has a poor UI was not intentional. So, you know, I appreciate sharing that, Jonathan. It would be great if you submitted an issue on GitHub, took a screenshot of it and just put it in there. Then we can add it into our list. You know, so not all these, a lot of these are features, but we have bug fixes and stuff like that in here. So that'll be really helpful. So I appreciate that for letting us know. I'll show you right now. If you've never used GitHub, so right here's the simple chat GitHub. You have to log in, and then you just create new issue. You know, fortunately, I'm not logged in to go through this well, but you create new issue, and maybe Nathaniel can do it when he shares his screen.
Yeah, I can unlock
Then you just create it. It's like a subject and a body. Really straightforward. You can copy and paste images straight into the body of the message, so it's straightforward to do. Oh, talking about that, one thing I didn't show on the roadmap, we'll be doing copy and paste into chat as well. So you can copy an image and paste it straight into the chat, and it'll auto upload that image, as well as drag and drop. So if you have a file, you can drag and drop that file into the chat, and it'll start uploading it too. You know, and then everything I'm talking about right now is in an Excel file. I'll be updating that. We have the simple chat roadmap from the repo. You can get to it over here called projects. Click the project, and you're going to be able to then see, I'll be updating this, and this is going to show our roadmap for everything that's, you know, our priorities and stuff like that over the next 3 to 4 months. So bug fixes will pop up in here, features, all that kind of stuff. Are they assigned or not? How progress and all that kind of stuff. This way, we have a lot more transparency and clarity for everyone, and you don't have to wait for a community call if you need to share anything with your organization as to what's coming up. And I think that's it. So that's it for me. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Stephen.
Perfect. How's everybody doing this afternoon? So my name is Steve Carroll. I'm a digital advisor in the federal civilian practice. But one of the things that I've taken on as part of the Simple Chat project is deployment and helping to simplify and smooth out that deployment process. One of the things that we've heard time and time again is that it's challenging to deploy. So one of the things that we've done, and I'm gonna start sharing my screen here, is try to create a process to smooth this out. One of the things that Paul mentioned early on in this discussion today was the use of AZD. So this we'll get into the underpinnings of that and what that means. But in the core of it, you'll find under our deployers, so in our GitHub project, you'll see we have a deployers folder, a biceps folder, and underneath here, you've got a readme.md file. This is the Rosetta Stone for all of the information that you're going to need to be able to successfully deploy this project. And I think Micah had a question related to US Gov versus commercial considerations. We actually had a section in here that was related to, hey, what features are and what features aren't in commercial versus Gov. So we do have some of that information already out there. Granted, these things change like the wind. So this was a snapshot in time, but this is certainly a good spot to be able to start from. So what I want to talk through very quickly is a normal process for deploying Simple Chat, some of the conventions that we've got in our solution deployment, and then actually walk through a simple deployment. And at the end, I'm going to transition over. We'll walk through a couple screenshots or a couple slides that I've put together on the whole AZD process. And then hopefully, depending on timing, we'll be able to come back and see what a final deployment actually looks like. So one of the things you'll notice here is that we've got some deployment variables, and this is just some placeholders that we're going to use throughout our deployment process. And why these guys are important is because they become part of our prerequisite process. So one of the things that we need to have for a successful deployment is we need to have an Azure application to be able to use all of the background processes. So to help simplify that, we've created 2 PowerShell scripts that will enable the Entra application and create all of the application registration roles. This is going to create the the Entra groups under the covers that you need to use to be able to use the application. Like Paul was mentioning, there's the different permissions to be able to have access to the content center and be able to see some of the additional admin functions. I've already run through these 2 scripts, and what it outputs is a document that looks very much like this. Just for your own benefit, I've changed my client secret so that this is not, when we record this video, I'm not spitting out my own client secret, but that's exactly what it would look like. And what you'll notice is that the variables that we talked about up top here, our app name, our environment, our cloud environment, or our cloud environment and our image name, these are going to be you're going to start seeing these guys used throughout our document here. So we received this. The reason we split these 2 documents out, or our PowerShell script out, is that in a lot of organizations, the Entra admins are separate from the folks that are actually deploying the application. So we wanted to separate that out so that there was a process that can be used to move that information out. So as we've got this, we've got all of our variables defined here. Now we can actually start going through, and you'll see that we go into the deployment process in our document. And I'm going to do this right as we go through here. So in Visual Studio Code, we have the ability to use a dev container. And I really, really strongly encourage you to use dev containers if at all possible, because we've put a lot of effort behind these to make it as smooth as possible. All of the dependencies that you're going to need to deploy this application successfully are captured in our dev container. So I'm working inside of my dev container. You'll see this in my bottom left-hand corner here, that I'm currently working in my dev container. And here I'm going to change into our deployers folder. I'm actually already in my deployers folder. So to set up an AZD environment for deployment, I need to do a couple things. First, I need to authenticate. So I'm going to do an AZD auth, and I'm going to log in. And here it's going to prompt me, hey, okay, you need to pick an account that you're going to sign in with. I'm going to log in with my Contoso account. This is an admin account that has rights over this subscription that we're going to be deploying to. I'll just get that out of my way for now. And now with that behind us, we need to actually create an environment. So I've been working on my development process, and I've got my dev environment all happy and working. We'll see this in a second. Really, I want to create my QA environment. And what we saw in that script a second ago, this guy here, is that I've got I've already created my application. In this case, my application name is going to be Bicep Chat. The environment that we're going to push into is QA. So let's start getting this set up. So here, we're going to use an AZD env new, and I want to call it my environment QA. And I want to set this as my default environment right now. And with that, we've created our environment. So what does that really get us? And if we go back to the deployers folder, under Azure, we'll see, if I actually click our refresh button, that I now have a QA folder here. And this is going to create 2 important files. One's our .env file, and one's our config.json file. We'll get into what those mean in a couple minutes, but let's keep going on. So I don't need to select it because we've already created it. We're in that. If you're using the GovCloud, we do have a little switch here that you've got to switch in your AZD environment before starting this process. I should have mentioned that before logging in. I'm going to do everything in a commercial account. So by default, it moves to our commercial account. But ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to start a provision process. So we're going to do AZD up. If I wanted to see what was going to be deployed beforehand, I could just use this provision. But we don't need to do that right now because we're going to ultimately just deploy. So the nice part is this is going to start spinning up our questions, or this is going to start spinning up. And the first thing it's going to ask me is, hey, what subscription do you want to actually do this? Because we've already pre-authenticated, it's letting me know, hey, this is the environment that we currently have access to. I'm just going to hit enter. And now you're going to see we're going to start getting a bunch of prompts in terms of questions that we need to ask for deployment. If I don't know what I'm actually looking at here, you'll notice that you've got a question mark here for help. By just hitting that question mark, it gives you all sorts of underpinnings of what you're actually trying to do and what this parameter is actually being set for. This specific one is an allowed IP address. This is if we're going to do a private networking deployment. We're not going to do that, so I'm just going to skip over it. So we've got some other variables here. We talked about our application name. I'm going to use mine as Bicep Chat. The authentication type. So do we want to use key-based authentication? Do we want to use managed identity? I would strongly encourage you to use managed identity because it just makes life exponentially easier. What environment do we want to deploy to? I want to go to the Azure cloud, not Gov cloud. Configure my application permissions. So this is getting into, do I want to start setting up that managed identity that we just specified 2 parameters ago as having access to all of the different subcomponents that it needs to be able to run this application successfully. So in this case, I'm going to say, yes, I do. Deploy content safety. So this is starting to get into the individual sub applications or the subcomponents of the application that we're going to start deploying. If you've already deployed Simple Chat, you may have seen these in the admin center. In this case, just for speed of deployment, I'm going to skip over these. So I don't need to deploy content safety or Redis. The speech service I'm going to skip over, our video index service, diagnostic logging. So this is going to take all of the information that we have under the covers and push it out to that log analytics workspace. Again, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to skip over it right now. Enable private networking. So this is one of the last features that I just recently added in to our deployment. This will go through and set up your own VNet, enable private networking for the entire solution end to end. If you've got all of these different application features enabled, it will turn them on with private networking, do all of the DNS work underneath the covers for you. It's a lot of work that this one's going to do, so this is a really powerful parameter. Again, it takes a couple extra minutes, so I'm going to skip over it for right now. And now we're going to get into some questions about that enterprise client app ID. So if we remember from a second ago, we had these client IDs. So I'm going to take the client ID. So fortunately, this is my correct client ID. And I'm going to start pasting these values in. And my app secret. So I'm going to go grab that guy. And we've got that. Now, the other one that we have was our principal ID. And we'll notice that that's as part of that same result that we were returning. So I can grab that guy, paste it in here. And then what environment are we actually deploying here? So in this case, we're pushing out our QA environment. And it's important that this name matches the AZD environment that we created in one of our earlier steps here. Now, what do we want to call the image? So we're creating a Docker image under the covers. What do we want this image to be called? So in this case, I'm going to call it Simple Chat. And I'm going to go with the latest. This enables us to have, if, hey, we want to roll our application back, I can use a prior image from the Docker or from the Azure Container Registry. So every time we push this application out, I'm going to stamp a new image, but I'm going to always have a latest version as well. One of the last questions that we've got is, what location do we want to actually deploy this to? And in this case, I'm defaulting out to the central US region simply because it's got all of the pieces that I know I've got this subscription having access to. And with this, it's just going to start. So now let me transition over to the PowerPoint, or the PowerPoint that I've got. And let me present this guy. Give me 1 sec while this guy pops up. Okay, so we just walked through setting up Simple Chat through these environment or through these parameters, But under the covers, what's it really doing here? So let's go to our next screen. So under the covers, AZD is two pieces. One, it's a command line tool that's enabling us to deploy all of the infrastructure that's associated to creating this application and getting it out the door. The second piece is actually deploying the application on top of that infrastructure that's been given. So two big pieces, and some teams will have great experience in deploying the infrastructure and not the application, and other teams will have just the opposite. This is a way that you can marry those two pieces together and have it all just work, and makes it really consistent to be able to come back to. So why does this matter? So again, as I said, it's repeatable. So in our solution here, we've defined all of the different components as bicep files. We also have the ability to, or the AZD deployment solution has the same ability to deploy Terraform code as well as bicep. We've chosen to go with bicep just out of our own benefits, but they're both fully supported with this. The other thing that it can do then is, as Nathan's making all of these cool application changes, he could use this and just deploy a new version, and it's going to check to say, hey, do I have any new application? Do I have any infrastructure work that needs to come as part of this effort? No, I don't. Great, I'm just going to go ahead and push out the different application. Again, it makes for reduced friction for deployment, and makes for very easy handling of all of this, all of their source code. So we saw very quickly, really the three key pieces. We saw an AZD init, which is deploying the actual solution, or excuse me, it's creating the shell of the environment that we want to deploy to. So remember, this could be a dev, a QA, production type scenario. I've seen it with quals. I've seen it with all sorts of different environment names. But what you're really focusing is encapsulating all of the variables associated to that environment in one spot. We saw that AZD up feature, and what that was doing was, after we were answering a bunch of our prompts, it's taking all of that data and pushing it forward. And that deploy process, which is taking the application after all of that infrastructure is deployed and pushing that up on top. There's a couple other really neat features, though, of AZD that we in Simple Chat haven't engaged at this point, and that's the ability for it to hook into pipeline configs. So there's an optional feature within AZD to allow it to hook into either Azure DevOps or GitHub repo or GitHub pipelines to be able to create these pipelines and just push them out as part of a normal CI/CD pipeline process. So we can see here we've got our infrastructure, all of our key reasons for doing this. Our application deployment. So we talked about all of the infrastructure pieces and how that's either written in bicep or Terraform. But the neat part about this is that the AZD deployment process supports a bunch of different languages. So it's supporting .NET, Python, as we can see on the screen here, Java, Node, all sorts of different full stack environments. Other thing that we're taking advantage of as part of this process is, during our infrastructure deployment, if we have a need to create keys. So in this case, we saw that I had my application key for my application environment, or my application secret. I can store that directly as a secret in a key vault, and that can get read out of the AZD deployment process. Super helpful for that scenario. We're obviously doing a container build, which is super helpful here. What else we got? Okay, so we talked about our AZD pipeline process. The big goal here is that it's going for 0 YAML writing. I hate writing YAML. I always get my indents wrong. I never am able to get it lined up correctly. This enables you to, once you've got a deployment process that's going to work, it just pushes that out seamlessly. Very, very exciting to watch that code go. Let's see what else we got here. So good examples, when do we want to use AZD? So most logical thought for me is when we're doing repeatable deployments. So if I've got to do a deployment over and over and over again, and I want that consistency, this is a great solution to go for. Again, full stack, where I've got a whole bunch of different components that have to get hooked together. and be able to push those into a unified environment, this is a great answer to do that with. Again, we talked about the container apps, where we're able to leverage all sorts of different deployment technologies. If I want to have just a traditional web app hosted in an Azure website, we can certainly push that directly out. Where this falls apart is where we can't use Bicep or Terraform to deploy the application. I personally have not seen that in any environment yet, but I'm sure somebody's got a solution that we can't use either Bicep or Terraform to deploy code. And really, in most of these scenarios, we've been able to genericize this to a level simply because we're able to use parameters and really take advantage of that parameterization to deploy to all sorts of different environments, including Azure Gov, commercial, different regions, all of the different scenarios that we could think about that may come up. And with that, my more information. So one can never have enough links for this type of information. For here, I've got 3 really good links for the Azure CLI. The top one here that you'll notice is the root for the Azure CLI documentation. I strongly recommend the references and the AZD extensibility. AZD extensibility gets into the scripting around being able to make these things work seamlessly together. So with that, when I transitioned over to using our PowerPoint slides, under the covers I had on my other screen, I was watching the deployment, make sure that it was going successfully. I'm going to transition back really quick, back to this screen. And we'll see that, so in the matter of about 10 minutes, this went through and we've got all of our parameters up top here. It's gone through, it's packaged all, it's compiled and built the application. It's compiled, it's built it up. It's built all of this infrastructure for me, including pushing out GPT models, Azure Container Registries, all of these different pieces that we need. And in the end, because I've already set up my Azure application to have my admin account as be a part of that admin group, I'm going to be able to take this link right here, control click it, open, and it pops up on the other screen. And right here, we're going to see that I can sign in. And I'm signed in with my personal my admin account. And because we've gone through and we've configured a bunch of those settings, things like our AI models is already pre-populated for us. So this is deployed, configured, out of the box, ready to go for us. If these aren't the models we want to use specifically, we can override that. There's certainly options in our Bicep code under the covers to be able to say, hey, I want to deploy 5.0 and Claude or whatever models you guys are looking to deploy. But all of this stuff now just works. I can fetch my models, I can test my configurations, and because we're using that managed identity, we can see that just out of the box during our deployment, it just successfully works. So with this, that kind of wraps up the area that I want to talk about with AZD and how we're using it to deploy the Simple Chat solution. I'll be monitoring chat if you guys have questions, but otherwise I'm going to turn it over to Nathan so that he can show you all the cool stuff that he's been working on.
Great work, Stephen. Thank you, man.
Absolutely.
Cool. Howdy, everybody. Nathaniel. I'm going to demo some features that I've been working on that are going to provide a lot of power to those teams that really require it. So the first thing I'm going to get into is I'm going to show what we're calling multi-endpoint models. As of right now, any of you admins out there who've done this before, you'll probably recognize this configuration. We're now going to call this our legacy AI model configuration. It only supports a single endpoint or APIM. When you enable new multi-endpoint, by the way, all of this is considered dev right now. I have so many configurations in here with so many different agents. Some of them are intentionally broken. So if I accidentally choose a broken agent, I apologize for that. When you go ahead and save that, what you're going to see is this new screen. We can actually configure multiple endpoints here. You can see I have across different clouds. So these two here are both AOAI instances in Azure Government. Down here, I have a connection to an AI Foundry instance that is running out of commercial in a completely different tenant. Here down, I have another AOAI instance that's in MAG, and then down here, we still have support for APIM as well. So even if you have APIM, if you have Azure AI Foundry, if you have AOAI instances, we're going to support all of those different endpoints. Getting into AI Foundry, it's a very, very complicated, very, very large, a ton of models out there. They all don't support the same libraries. So at initial launch, we are only going to support any of the models. Most of them are listed under Direct to Azure, but it's any model that either uses the OpenAI or the Azure OpenAI library, in addition to the cloud models. Not all of the libraries are under Direct to Azure that will be covered, but most of them are. Another feature we have is here, you can see we have the disable and enable options. So as we go through, I'll actually disable all of them. I'll leave APIM on. And this will also affect the performance of my agents. So just bear that in mind, because now that I've disabled them, nothing has access to them. But when you go through here, I'll go ahead and choose this guy. You're going to go ahead and choose your endpoint name. You choose your provider. This will automatically populate with some of the information, such as the project API and the Open API versions. You put in your Foundry name. You choose your authentication type. We're supporting service principal in both types of managed identity, as well as API key. If you choose API key, API keys for Foundry are inference only, just like they are for AOAI. So you cannot do a fetch. But if you do choose a principal, you can just come over here, you press fetch the models. You can see down on the bottom right, I found 4 new models that I didn't have before, when I fetched a total of 10. So as I come down here, I'll be able to scroll through and I can see all these new models that come up. Another new feature that we're adding is previously, when you would add a model and you would see the model, the only thing that you got to see was the deployment name. We can now actually rename the models so that users can see that name. So as you can see, my GPT-5 Nano deployment is actually named Tiny5. Those are the names you're going to see as I'm going through and either showing models or showing agents. So we can disable them. We can have multiple endpoints. We are not doing multiple endpoints for embedding or any of the other services we have right now. It is only for our GPT, LLM models, and everything else like that. In addition to that, if we come over to, I'll use personal agents because that's where I have most of my configs at. We also bring the multi-model endpoints to our personal and group workspaces. Now, with the multi-endpoints are also going to come a bit of configurations. If I'm doing a local model, the general process to do that is going to be the same, except for when you get right here. We are expecting to have your endpoints configured, and then you no longer have to configure different endpoints. You just select from your different model that you want. You can see those names, those display names that I had for the different models, although mine are comically funny, those are what show up for your users to select from. The other feature that we don't have implemented yet is those descriptions that were shown. Those descriptions will actually show up as they mouse over these. So you can provide a brief description about when or why they might want to choose a specific model. The other support that we have is you'll also see that I can add support for Azure AI Foundry agents. So we're now, any of the agents that you create in Azure AI Foundry, we are now bringing support for those as well. Much like choosing models, all you do is you choose those endpoints that you have. So you can see that I still have this AI Foundry. This is from my global scope. And you can see I have my personal custom endpoint that I have configured. I'm going to come through. I'm going to select that. I'm going to go ahead and click agents. You can see I found 2 agents. I'm going to select which one I want to implement. It populates all the information for our new Azure AI Foundry agents. You can click next to all of them. You can also skip right through it. And then you just save the agent. Now, for anyone who is paying attention, you might have seen this little feature down in the corner when I was doing that. When you get to the end of an agent, probably should have non-clicked. I'll do this with Foundry because it's faster. You'll also see this little submit template down here. So I'm going to go ahead and press that. And you can see down in the bottom right corner, it said I've submitted a template. Somebody asked what the approval features were for. This is part of what some of those approval features are going to be for, as well as notifications. Another new feature we have is what we're calling agent templating. To see the user end of that, I can come over here, I can click agent templates. I can view the details of some of these templates. So if I come over here and click this one, I can see the instruction set for it. Some of these are just auto-generated, so they're fairly simple. But I can go as far as click Use Template, and the entire process, plugins, model selected, and everything is pre-configured based upon that template all the way to the end. So it becomes very easy to share or submit templates. Admins can create them, users can submit them. From the admin side of the house to the agent templating, this is what the admin side is going to look like. This approval will be moved into the system-wide. That's initially where we got the idea from. So I still have to move that, but the idea is going to look the same. You have the ability to disallow user template submissions. So if you disallow it at the admin level, the little button for them to submit them will disappear. You can still use agent templating without needing to have users to submit them, or you can use it with it. We also have the auto approval system. So you can either just auto approve all templates that are submitted, or you can request admins to approve. So you can see that one that I just created, the ZXCD guy, he's down here waiting to be approved. If I approved it, it would come through. I can see all my pending approvals. I have a bunch sitting here. Here's my list of all the approved templates that you were seeing, complete with our pagination to go through those, make them easy to look through and find. You can see any of the ones that are rejected. So if they rejected it and you wanted to go ahead and re-update it, you can go ahead, view, delete it. That will all tie in with the notification systems that are already implemented through this pane over here. So all these notifications, all these approval requests, it will show up for admins over there rather than in that UI there.
Awesome.
Pretty much everything.
Awesome. Great work. I mean, there's, having these templates, R&D to Swifty, having the templates, it just makes it a lot easier for complex instructions to be shared out and leveraged. Having multiple GPT endpoints is going to make it a lot easier to have something in East or West or Virginia or Arizona, wherever you want to have those models deployed, and have multiple endpoints. An endpoint that supports Azure OpenAI models, and then another endpoint that supports the Foundry models, and allows you to use Llama or Claude or anything like that. So it's going to make it a lot easier. Then have a nice clear method up front to be able to label those. Maybe you want to call GPT-5.2 Pro high thinking, or deep thinking, and then GPT-5 Nano fast. So the users don't have to think about what the model name is. They just select the name to support their use case. I'm going to share one more thing here around, because I didn't do it earlier, and it's around web search. I don't think I actually did the web search part. So web search here, I'm going to bring up, I don't know if I can get into it. If I get into the Foundry here, so make things a little bit easier. All right, so here's the Foundry. So we have agents in here. You can see an agent in here called web search. So this is where you set up this agent, just a normal agent, and you have an ID and stuff like that. And then you add your knowledge, which is a copilot, which is grounding with Bing. You add that. And then you come over to your new environment, your latest one, 237.001 plus. And then in search, there's this new area called web search. You enable it, you get to define this user notice, and I'll show you what that means. You include all your data and stuff like that. It's using a system to manage assigned identity. So it doesn't matter if you guys see this, you can't access it because you won't have those permissions. So after you set that up, go over to chat, and our web search button is back. You click on it, that defined message now shows up right here. Now you can do some fun things. I guess I asked it a few times there. This is using GPT-5 Nano, so it should be pretty quick. Didn't leave a lot of, I appreciate everybody asking questions through the chat here. There we go. We got all the great information, kickoff time, who's playing, everything like that. In the history here, in the citations, we get citations. Click on it. You get to see all the information. Click on the link then. It's going to take you to where it went, what it used. So you get to see all that great info, and all that jazz. Yeah. Something else here, you can edit, delete, and retry messages now too. That's a new one. Same thing for over here. Also, messages. Masking. Oh yeah, masking. So this is another one you can mask here. If you mask that out, now that is no longer contained when you ask questions. So you can do message masking, or you can mask the entire message. So now if I ask who won this information is not in the response back, so it wouldn't have this to be able to answer it. So that might be helpful if you're just walking through things you want to, there are scenarios where it's helpful. So that's everything, web search, integrating in there, using it. Does anybody have any more questions? Our next meeting is March 19th. If you already registered for this one, once we submit after this call, we'll create a new meeting invite. It'll actually go out to you, so you don't have to worry about re-registering or anything like that. You'll get a notice to, for that meeting in your Outlook and whatnot. Yeah, tons of questions. That's okay. Please reach out to your, your specialist, or reach out to me, reach out to Steven, and we'll make sure you get, the support you need. I appreciate everybody's time today. And it's 2:00. Again, email me, email Steven, reach out to us on LinkedIn anytime, just contact us. We love doing what we're doing. We enjoy working with you guys. Everything you're doing, it really helps guide where Simple Chat is today. It's dramatically different than it was 12 months ago because of all your great feedback. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it, and have a great day.